Postmodern Aesthetics 2, so we're getting into the practical, nitty-gritty kind of stuff. Context, real quick, before we get into, first thing that we're going to talk about changes is the rupture in the sensory motor link. So let's talk about what happened in the classical period to get there. Classicism, we abide by what we call the action image. In modernism, we are experiencing the process of the rupture in the action image's sensory motor link. In postmodernism, the sensory motor link is broken. So modernism is this transitory period, right? Although there are certain media objects that on their own try to close out the experience, that the sensory motor link has been ruptured for audiences. This is what we talked about in the last video as generally your Hollywood movies, which like to appropriate old linear cause-effect styles. The further you usually get to art film type of styles, the closer you usually get to a ruptured sensory motor link, right? Where things don't operate by clear logics, which is why it's not as profitable, right? Because it's not as easily pleasurable by the end of the movie. So, action image. What is the action image that exists in classicism, that has the sensory motor link, that is beginning to be ruptured? The action image is associated with Hollywood-style cinema. Essentially, what you need to know for the purposes of this class, the action image is the linear cause-effect style cinema. The action image actually has several parts. It is much more complex. You don't need to know that. What you need to know for the test is we associate it with linear cause-effect style cinema. I'm going to explain to you the sensory motor link, which has a few parts as well, and we're going to use the clip in another Hitchcock film, because he's perfect for these kinds of things, in which instead of asking you to watch it on your own, I'm going to pull it up here, and I'm going to walk you through what's happening, because it's very small little portions, and it would be perfect if we had a class for me to show you this, but I don't, and so we're going to talk about little specific portions. So bear with me here. Sensory motor link, it's the basis of the action image. It's the big part. You have an action. You have a moment, which we call the space of the virtual, in between actions, where the space of potential opens up. Then you have another action. The next action brings about the next virtual, then the next action, and so forth. So there is a gap between perception and action, and that gap can be small or large. That space is called the virtual. It's the space of potential where the following action has not yet been set in stone, where that's being decided. So think about people very quickly. How does that gap get larger? It depends on the person, and it depends on the context. For instance, the thing that I am about to show you, this woman in any other context would probably never have a potential in which she could murder her husband. So context, that's larger. She has potentials where she can not murder her husband, sing a song, right? These are all things that are available to her. If I were in that situation, I may be able to murder my husband, not murder my husband, but sing a song might not be available to me because it's not part of my personality, right? Or maybe it is, but in a different context, right? So the gap, what are my options as the person in the context, which we're about to get into. I'm about to change this up. It doesn't have to be a person. It can also be an object. But right now we're considering people as the example. So is the space of potential large? Do they have many options in which they can react in that situation? AKA, what kinds of social anxieties are there? That's going to make it smaller, right? Have you had a cup of coffee that was too caffeinated that now you're anxious and you can't do the work that you expected to do? It's going to make it smaller. What kinds of things opened it up? Maybe you recently had an interaction with someone that you like and they really affirmed you. Now it's opening up this potential, right? You're feeling more confident. You're able to do, it's affecting your work life maybe, right? And so remember that in the postmodern sphere, we are constantly switching between very different contexts in which if I'm going from my work life to a friend life or, right, and something happens in my work life that closes down potential for how fun and enjoyable I can be, which now I'm in my friend life, and it just seems like I'm that type of person, which closes down potential for social opportunities, right? For me moving up status in whatever social sphere I'm in. So all of these things that what I'm trying to get at is in the postmodern period, this is something that's unrelated, something that happened at work. They can't see the something that happened at work. That's invisible to them. So they're attributing it to a cause that is a personality, right? And this is constantly happening in several different areas of your life in which people perceive something, this is the appearance of truth, when really the cause was over here. And that's only one aspect, right? How many aspects happen in the course of a conversation that you have with someone in which assumptions are being made about the appearance of something, but you don't have access to all the other things that happened that made them say that thing, or do that thing, or feel that way, that made their bracket of potential open up or close down, right? And then they'll move from a social context to some of their family context. And now, and it's constantly accumulating over the course. So let's go back to the details, the nitty gritty, and then we'll get farther into the implications after that. Okay, so we just said potential, yes, has not been set in stone. In the space of the virtual, there is a bracket of options. A body, which is not only human, has the capacity to perform. The gap may be smaller or wider depending on the person, the situation, or the object. So first, let's look at the bracket of potential. Let's go to that YouTube clip together. So for context, this movie, Sabotage, it is about they're owners of a theater. Theater blacks out. The woman knows that they're in a bad financial spot and won't give them back their money, right? They say, this isn't our fault, kind of thing. The guy comes in, the husband who you're about to see, and says, give them back their money. He makes a generous claim. I have a new thing lined up. So he has a contact he's going to be put in contact with. Turns out the contact is like this terrorist group, right? And they pretend it's not a bomb. They say, you're going to deliver the fireworks or whatnot to whatever thing. So, of course, first of all, the power grid we find out later was a sabotage. The second sabotage, of course, being the bomb. The guy, says he feels uncomfortable with it, but he's already been worked into the situation. And so he finds the only way to get it there in time, essentially, after many things happen, is he has their kid deliver the package. Even though he doesn't know explicitly it's a bomb, it's whatever, but he knows there's something shady about it. He's very clearly, when they say fireworks, it's like he's pretty onto it that it's a bomb. He instructs his kid, obviously, do not make any other stops. Do not do any kind of like dilly-dallying. Do not get on the train or something. He says, go straight there. First of all, because the part about getting on the train, which the kid ends up doing, is that it's highly corrosive and flammable. The entire thing explodes. Kid dies. Okay, so we get to the point where we are at now, in which he explains the situation to his wife, but he explains it in a way that, right, the whole context seems like he wasn't responsible for it. So let's watch the clip together. Go ahead and get to like 24 around and then press play. He's saying things at her. Look at her expression, right? Close up on the face, down to the object. Close up is the virtual par excellence. The close up is the best way to show the virtual, the bracket of potential in cinema. That's something I would write down and include in your notes because you will probably be tested on it. What aesthetic, formal quality is associated with the virtual? It's the close-up. So we look at her face. We see all of the potential forming for what she's deciding she wants to do, how she feels about everything. Then the object. We scroll down to the knife and the fork. There is a different set of potential that is afforded to someone when you have an object that is a knife and a fork in your hands than if you have a stuffed animal in your hands. Hopefully that is very clearly apparent. The bracket of potential for the options you can choose are very different from stuffed animal to knife. Bracket of potential dependent on objects, context, social things that are formed, person, all of these variables. Okay, so let's keep going in the film. Keep play. See her mulling over knife. Look, the quick put away. It's this, it's almost like she can see her subconscious is dangerous with those objects, right? Looking at the chair. getting the food. So that's a great way to explain it, right? What potential do you have to do with a knife and a fork? Well, you can get food. That's not only not violent, it's usually caring, right? It's usually caring about someone. So you have very different options for the same exact object, which can be violent. And this mirrors the meta part of technology that we've been talking about the entire time. It's not about the object, it's about how you use it. It's about what potentials you see are available to you and ways to use it. Because many times, Hollywood directors, they don't see the potential to use it in any other way. It's just not logical for them because it's a bad movie, right? There are certain brackets of potential that are beyond their bounds for what they can allow themselves to put in their movie. It would be too weird. And so it's not that you're rationalizing it as it's not profitable. It's that it's outside the bounds of your desires, right? So you see him slowly get up and you even see that moment of perception. Perception is action, right? You see the way that she's handling the thing. Perception. That's what throws you into the moment of the virtual. And this is all what cinema is based on. Seer, perception. Do you have perception? Is it hidden, right? Therefore, the potential changes, whether it's hidden or visible. So he sees. You can see his hesitancy in his eyes. He's now spun into a different space of the virtual, right? In which his actions, watch him walk around the table slowly. And this is a good guy, by the way. He wasn't ever intending to kill the child. Look at her face as he approaches. And so this has been talked about in film theory through and through. This moment in which they're looking at each other. She almost seems fearful. He was also reaching for the knife. She grabs it quicker than him. So now they're looking at each other with her having the knife. He knows. Look at him lean in. And then she stabs him. It's like and so they have this debate over, did he want to be killed? Was his guilt, right? The guilt affording him to lean in. He knew what was going to happen, and she did it, right? And so it's like they both did it, is what the argument goes. But we'll move on. Hopefully that's the action ended up being the killing the husband. But there were so many other potential options she could have taken. You could see she didn't want to in so many other moments. If he had gone over to the other side, would she have killed her husband? The potential was constantly shifting from moment to moment as he approached. One option was becoming more probable as he approached, while other things were becoming no longer possible within her bracket of potential. And I think that's a great example, also a great example of an object, but I'm going to give you one more example of an object that I like to use in this class. So let's talk about how a body of potential can be an object for the space of the virtual. So we're going to use an example of a table under rainfall. So if I say it's raining on a table outside, a table that has been abandoned, right? A lot of times you're going to think action is rain, which is also an object. So there can be completely object actions, bracket of potentials, reactions. It doesn't have to have a human at all. Action, rain, table. It hits it. What do you think the reaction is going to be? Probably you're going to say something like it's going to slowly erode over time. It will, unless what kind of table it is. It's one with those nice varnishes. If you ever go into the conference rooms, I don't know if you guys ever go into the floor. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about with that resin varnish over the table, those nice tables that you see in offices. So if it's got that, then what's happening? Action, rain. The bracket of potential changes depending on the specific body at hand and its qualities, its potentials. Reaction. Rain does not erode the table. It rolls off. And so we're always, when we're considering this and we're using this as a film theory, we're never just considering people-people relations. We're considering people-object relations, object-object relations, so forth. Okay. This is why the postmodern situation is so complicated. We're leaving it here. There are many other variables in that. So how does the breakage in the sensory motor link affect cinema? What used to be an extensive relation to the world becomes an intensive relation. So extensive relation means movement across, movement externally in our external reality, aka Hitchcock, knife, potential, move into the real world. Now, in the postmodern reality, a lot of times it's an internal, it's like a boiling point is the best way I can describe this. It's an increase in temperature internally. We don't see it visibly in the real world until it reaches a boiling point and constitutes an event. And I'm going to explain this hopefully better. Time is now marked by durée or pure duration, whereas time was marked, you don't have to know this because I haven't included in the notes, I probably should have, chronometric time in the previous extensive relation. So chronometric means the watch of the commander. It means that times tend to take however long. So you're in a movie in which you're waiting for, the parents are waiting for kids to come home. They say, you took longer than expected, right? How do you know that it's a longer expected? Because there is an expected bracket or potential of time in which, things tend to be taken. We know on the other side that they went and did hooligans or whatnot. However, hooligan shenanigans, sorry, I should have included the shenanigans part. Time now marked by duration. So instead of this extensive relationship where, because everything is happening, make a decision, go do an external action, make a decision, go do an external action. Now we see the way in which films are constructed, in which people sit in the virtual, right? So you see all these things accumulating. Something is happening aesthetically. Something else is happening aesthetically that drives up the boiling point, drives up the boiling point. Something else will happen to them, drives down the temperature, drives it up, up, down, up. Eventually we get to a point in which something internally changes about that character because something has pushed it over the limit. The best example I can think of about this is Taxi Driver, because Travis Bickle, the entire movie, no matter what surface level things change, he goes round and round, does the same type of stuff. He hasn't ever changed internally, so therefore he can't seem to succeed. He can't seem to make any real extensive change in his external world until something snaps. And of course, this example is a very poor example. We'd like to hope that would be a positive change. Something snaps in which he changes his external world dramatically by killing everyone. So, time is marked by this duration. We don't know how long this person will change, and we don't know which direction they will change. And many things that happen throughout the day that in extensive relation to the world, like they go in to get a cup of coffee. Think how often your characters in TV shows go in to get a cup of coffee. They meet a new relationship. That's not constitutive of an event. That's no longer an event. It would be an event in a linear cause-effect type situation, but that does nothing to change the character. Obviously, they usually continue and stay the same exact person forever, and nothing has really internally changed about them. Okay, let's move on. It takes as long as it takes for the event to occur. It takes until the boiling point happens, and it may never occur, right? Maybe the boiling point, let me just get to the examples, because I think maybe this is confusing without some sort of practical part. Okay, so I'm skipping the importantly paragraph, and I'm moving on to the you will know when an event occurs part of the postmodern aesthetics 2. Something kicks up a notch and you sporadically, I'm using example from my personal life, to apply for grad school. So it's not that the last action that got me to change into the kind of person that said, I'm going to make this major life decision in my life, was that the last thing was the thing that got me. It was a slow accumulation of things that changed my psychological state, that eventually changed my desires, the things that I wanted from life that I didn't have before, right? It's the accumulation of necessary moments to get me to affectively change as a person. And that small thing that happened next was just the last increment to a boiling point. And however long that takes is durée. A death, for example, in movies will often shake someone's personality enough to constitute an event or a boiling point. In cinema, it's when the character is no longer the person they had been the entire movie. A lot of times, characters almost never reach events in TV shows, because the whole point of the TV show is that they have to keep a shtick based on these kinds of people revolving around life and nothing really ever changing. Think about It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, right? No one ever affectively changes a person. They continue. Same with any sort of sitcom. No one ever actually changes. They just go through events that are kind of insignificant, and then they go to the next week and they're the same exact typical person that you expect. I'm moving past the Travis Fickle and moving into appearance of change. Let's talk about the aesthetic appearance of change while nothing really happens. So let's say, this is where we're going to start talking about the invisibility, visibility aspect. Let's say that I get a promotion in a job position where I work remotely. I make the assumption that it's because of my merit. Promotion says, I have done this amount of work, and now my merit was the thing that caused the change. Really, it turns out it's because two people quit. I can't see because I work remotely, and executives are struggling to offload the task. For the company, they felt the stress they had to channel into action. Is this an event? Not usually for a work environment. It may be stressful. Stress doesn't necessarily mean an event. It's just circulating flows. Reactionary actions don't constitute significant change anymore. We're not looking at extensive relations within the external world. If there's no change of internal temperature or intensivity, then nothing has happened, right? So managing moments of heightened stress are a part of what we consider work. It's something that must be dealt with, and it's unlikely any major unconscious changes happened that moved one of the company executives to come one step closer to quitting and becoming a philosopher, to travel to East Asia, to decide to divorce his materialistic significant other, right? Or maybe it's a first step to one of those. What it probably caused instead was more of a shuffling around of the surface level flows without any change in internal psychic state. So the executives will likely then channel that personal stress they felt for the day elsewhere. They're going to move that flow into what? A few drinks after work at the bar, right? So that is the aesthetic surface changing while nothing affectively really changed inside of them. Hopefully this is becoming clearer as we use practical examples. For me, however, as the person with the promotion, this moment genuinely appears to be a reward for all of my hard work, right? It appears as if the boiling point was my consistent labor driving up the temperature until the breaking point of the promotion. It turns out that none of those surface level things were the actual incremental changes necessarily to motivate that event just yet. Maybe if I had kept going, eventually it would have. Maybe not. Maybe there would have always been people who were better than me, but those two quit, right? So there's no way to say if I would have been the right candidate for the choice. I was just there. AKA, there is no true, quote-unquote, causal linkage, AKA go back to sensory motor link. There's no causal linkage that can be deduced, right? That is readily available for me to view anymore. What appears as fact isn't necessarily so. And this is me now linking it back to the last lecture. When there are so many flows that must constantly be managed in the day-to-day, it is impossible to say what caused what and when so much is consistently hidden from our view. But then again, in the perspective jumping, so much is consistently hidden from their point of view. So they don't know what caused the things that allowed them to move that somewhere else. Affective flows. Okay. Many of these little distinctions at the very end, I don't expect you to know. I'm trying to explain it to you away, and so that when you get to these, that you hopefully genuinely understand them. What you need to know is, I will expect you just to think, because these are very difficult terms, right? I will expect you to know the literal definitions of these. Extensive relation, it's the literal movement across a reality. I want you to know, where do we associate extensive relation? We associate it with either the action image, where is the action image associated with classical style cinema. I expect you to know some of the developments, right? So what is the modernist period, that first paragraph? Modernist is the process of the rupture in the action image's sensory motor link. It's that development period. Which period is the one, if I put, which one where the sensory motor link has been fully broken? Postmodernism, right? These are the kinds of things I expect you to know. So basically everything past page 1 are to help contextualize these things so that you can understand them practically, right? And then we'll get into a little bit at the very end, but also not things. The main focus for you to study for the end is these terms that are bolded and then those first paragraphs, and know the distinctions between. If I were to do a true-false, right, is a body, and I would probably phrase this differently, only human or only a subject or whatnot, your answer would be false. Any of these distinctions that I've just made about the virtual and larger potential, smaller potential, If I gave an example of that, are things that you should know. You should know that duration is not marked by distinct moments in time. It's whenever it happens, whenever enough things have accumulated for the tipping point to happen. Okay, and the event marks a genuine change in a situation. An event does not mark any sort of aesthetic surface level. Oh, I've got a problem. A problem doesn't mean that any genuine change in my situation has happened. We are constantly encountering problems throughout our life in which nothing is genuinely changing about us underneath. We're just dealing with them. We're just offloading the flows, aesthetically moving to somewhere else, to a different aesthetic space in which things are better afterwards. Okay, let's get to the end parts of this notes, and then I'll let you leave. Okay, we're now on page 3. In summary, postmodern cinema constantly plays with the post-truth reality of visibility and invisibility, inside knowledge and outside knowledge, the appearance of things that don't have real substance, yet they have real substance in terms of consequence, even if the only thing that was painted was an immaterial image. When people will genuinely act based on the image of a thing appearing true, then that truth is genuinely projected into the material reality of things, which means a new image of the world is now being projected for whoever happens to witness, right? The physical realm is now shaped by appearances, by the immaterial realities and fantasies that we perpetuate, mobilize in our material realm. Hence my opening films. For understanding the contemporary mediascape, I am always trying to be forward-thinking towards what will eventually happen by showing you films that exemplify both the past in ways that are very interesting to you, right? This is why ethical viewership is important. It's why optimistic humanistic views are important. If objects are bodies that influence flows too, remember that every object, especially cinema with this collective influence, had multiple human flows going into them at one point. Their desires, their limitations and anxieties that are being projected onto you as what is desirable and what things are beyond the limits of your potential that you should ever do, right? And those humans had multiple other humans and objects flow into them. So the shifting of perspective is unending, and the way that you view humanity based on all of the flows that go into you is the way that you are going to act onto the world. It's why your perception of whatever your truth is so important, because you're acting on that. You perceive your perception of the world to be as truth. You have no other you can't escape that, right? We're all stuck in an ideology in which we can't get outside of. And you guide forces that affect the ways that others perceive humanity and what norms are acceptable. So finally, this is my final little spiel that I like to give. Ideas and philosophies about what kind of person you decide to be are incredibly powerful in our current historical moment, and the whole point of how confusing and fragmented and constantly shifting is that it seems is that the world appears like it's out of your control when you are probably more powerful than ever, right? Remember that appearance of constant flux is only the appearance of change. Nothing significant is happening underneath. The logics are all the same for how the world works. Everything is almost consistent, while the appearance of the world seems like everything's breaking down and combusting. And that's a result of the specific, consistent, the formal elements that we've developed over the past as the things that we valued and the things we shut out as things that we didn't value. So that's my long spiel. I know that this last second part, which is one reason why I decided to break it into 2 parts, can be very difficult for people. And so please, instead of putting your questions, because I have now realized that I don't have time to check attendance, please, if you need a question asked before an exam, and I wrote that, I think, on an announcement, I will make an announcement regardless that is like updating you of where we're at, what kinds of things you need to be thinking about, etc. But please send me any questions that you need clarified before an exam directly to my email. That way I can help. I can also do Skype sessions to pretend that it's a office meeting, right? So these things are all possible. I'm sure I will make one more video. If not, it has been really great having you guys as a class. I've really enjoyed this. I wish that we got to continue meeting in person, but c'est la vie. So I hope you guys are all doing well, and I'll see ya.